Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA recently went to the UK, and well, he said that the UK has fallen, and I would unfortunately have to agree with him. I've been making video after video about what's happened to jolly old UK, and unfortunately, loads of people are suffering as a result of stupid management, stupid leadership, I guess you could say, and well, indoctrination comes from the education system of Oxford and Cambridge, two prestigious universities, which you'd think would produce some very smart individuals. Instead, you produce lots of ideological dingbats that have got no idea about reality or anything to do with logic or common sense. Now, I am a huge fan of debates when they are real debates, not this whole argument back and forth. I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to shut you down every time that you're talking. That's not a debate. That is what you'd call an argument. And I'm not for the tension or the argument. Everyone these days is looking for that moment, that clickbait moment where you shut the person down and then it gets clipped and it's sent viral. And the people that Charlie Kirk was debating at Oxford and Cambridge were really interesting, to say the least. There was one of them that was constantly jumping up and down. He was a little bit too trigger happy, thinking that he was smarter than Charlie Kirk, trying to get his little moment of fame. Loved yelling and screaming and jumping up and down, that sort of nonsense. And Charlie was very patient with him, or tried to be very patient with him. And Charlie, being Charlie, literally dismantled every single point that little dweeb tried to make. And we can make another video about that another time. But anyway, Charlie's thoughts on the UK. He believes that the UK has fallen, but according to Charlie Kirk, he wrote in the Spectator World, trust me, Trump's revolution is coming to the UK. What I learned from debating at Oxford and Cambridge, when I was growing up, people often said British politics were where America's would be in 5 to 10 years. What this meant was that Britain was more to the left of America, more secular, more socially liberal, more environmentalist, or globalized, I should say. The assumption was that over time, the left would always win out. So whenever Britain was now, America would be soon. I travelled to the United Kingdom in May to debate the students and faculty of Cambridge and Oxford universities, in large part because that old assumption is dead and gone. Donald Trump's political revolution has destroyed it. Now Britain is the country trailing behind America. Make no mistake, Trump's revolution is coming to the UK. But as I learned, just like in America, the students of elite universities may be the last to realise. My first stop was at the Cambridge Union. Stepping onto the union debate floor was like stepping into a time warp, and not just because the floor was once used to plot a map of the D-Day landings. The Cambridge student body might as well be stuck in the high summer of 2020. For all their learnings and talent, the students were unprepared and appalled to hear takes that by now, the mainstream and even boring in America, when I described lockdowns as pointless and forced submission to mRNA shots as tyranny, they seethed and muttered. When I said George Floyd died from a drug overdose rather than under a police officer's knee, they went into an uproar, which is actually true. He died of an overdose. While these students have long abandoned the faith that named Trinity and Jesus colleges, they remain deeply hostile to heresies against a different religion. The Oxford Union was slightly more open-minded when I described America and Britain as two of the least racist nations in the entire world. The students merely laughed instead of going into a collective paroxysm, or basically going crazy. In a way, students at Britain's two oldest universities were identical to those I met in the US. Namely, they were completely obsessed with the fine details of American politics, even our domestic issues. I was prepared for a lot of the questions about tariffs, Ukraine, and Israel. What I wasn't expecting were complaints about American tax rates the students would never have to pay and Supreme Court decisions they would never have to abide by. One young man even brought up the Stormy Daniels case. It turns out that Stormy has been a guest speaker at both the Oxford and Cambridge unions. How about that? Good old corn star Stormy Daniels goes to Oxford and Cambridge to participate in the debate, believe it or not. My goodness. Don't Brits have their own dumb, scandals to follow? Why are they so invested in a half-baked foreign one? More than once, students fretted about Donald Trump's decision to admit white South Africans as refugees into America. How much do these students know about the asylum laws of their own country? They don't really know too much about it, because if they really were to look, they'd see that they're being invaded by one particular group known as Islamists. But anyway, they're being invaded by one particular group of religion, I should say, not group of people. Islamist is a religion. Many were deeply outraged about Trump's bid to abolish birthright citizenship when Britain got rid of it in 1983. Keir Starmer knows no signs of bringing it back. As in America, a distressing number of British students seem unable to deliver a question without reading it off their phones. That said, the students at Oxbridge are certainly bright and better at insults than the average American. Some are impressively well informed. When the Gaza war came up, I thought I could expose the excessive focus on it by asking a student to name what African state is now in civil war, Sudan, and what Asian country is seeing ongoing ethnic cleansing, Myanmar. Unfortunately for me, he aced both questions, which is the guy that was jumping up and down all the time. Being clever is not the same as being wise. If Oxbridge students were long on wit, they were short on wisdom. It's very true. In the US, an ideological transformation has swept almost every campus I visit. 5 years ago, I typically meet a wall of hostility like the one I found at Cambridge. But in today's America, college-age students have moved towards Trump more heavily than any other demographic. The decline of religiosity among young people has halted and may be in reverse. On dozens of campuses in the past year, I've met thousands of young people refusing to passively accept the decline of their civilization. In contrast, at Oxbridge, I found the dominant outlook to be depressed and depressing near nihilism. They were students who hardly cared about their country, had less free speech than 50 or 100 years ago. They were appalled that a person might think life begins at conception, but not that their own country is being steadily Islamicized. They love the abstract fight for democracy in Ukraine, but find the actual outcome of democracy in America very icky. That fixation on America says it all. There's more interest in moralizing about the bad man across the Atlantic than in salvaging their own declining country. In Britain at large, a very different attitude prevails. I spoke to everybody I could while there, from drivers and blue-collar workmen to journalists, and the shockingly large number of people who recognized me in the streets. What I heard from them was clear. They're angry at Britain's net zero-driven energy stagnation. They're furious at the Biden-esque levels of immigration inflicting on them by their conservative government in the past decade. Over and over, they told me they were ready to smash the British party system to bits, and elect a Reform Prime Minister, which, by the way, seems like Reform UK is actually leading in the polls at the moment, which is quite telling. The great turn in Britain is coming. And when it arrives, the students of Oxbridge were the most surprised of all. So Oxbridge meaning Oxford, so Oxford Union and the Cambridge Union. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? So you've got Charlie Kirk, an American, going to the UK, and more of these students are concerned about American politics that don't really affect them than they are with their own damn country. That's quite stark to me if you look at it from my perspective at least. Like, you should focus, yes, on your own issues, but I know there are lots of other issues because America is like big daddy. Everything that America does sort of trickles down, but not when it comes to the UK, I don't think. Australia, 100%. Australians, we look up to the UK as well as the US. So whatever the US does first, we'll do it about 5 years later. So we're sort of like catching up on all of the insanity that has befalled the US and even the UK to some extent. But if we're not careful, we're going to turn out like the US was a couple of years ago, and then also the UK right now. But maybe we should heed the warning that Charlie Kirk has given. Anyway, that's enough from me, but you guys take care, be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.